The scorching afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Serengeti plains as 7-year-old Mateo Morales stumbled through the tall golden grass, his small voice hoarse from screaming for help. It had been nearly 4 hours since he'd lost sight of his family's safari vehicle. What had started as an innocent moment, chasing a colorful lilac-breasted roller bird, while his parents photographed a distant herd of elephants, had turned into every parent's worst nightmare. Mateo's khaki shorts were torn from thorny acacia branches. His small arms were covered in scratches that stung with every drop of sweat. The water bottle his mother had given him that morning lay empty somewhere behind him in the vast expanse of wilderness. His lips were cracked and bleeding. The initial adrenaline that had fueled his panicked running had long since faded, replaced by a crushing exhaustion and terror that made his chest feel impossibly tight. A sound made him freeze completely. Not the benign chirping of birds or the rustle of wind through grass. This was different. A low, rumbling vocalization that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath his feet. A lion's call, but not aggressive, almost inquisitive. Mateo's small body began to shake uncontrollably. Every survival lesson his mother, Dr. Elena Morales, had drilled into him seemed to evaporate from his mind. Don't run. Make yourself appear large. Never turn your back. But how could a 7-year-old boy make himself appear large to an apex predator? He had tried to retrace his steps, but everything looked the same. Endless grass, scattered trees, the distant purple smudge of mountains on the horizon. The sun was beginning its descent, and Mateo knew from his mother's countless warnings that the savannah at night was a completely different world, a deadly world. The grass ahead of him parted slowly, deliberately, and then Mateo saw him, the most magnificent and terrifying creature he had ever encountered. A massive male lion emerged from the vegetation, easily weighing over 420 pounds, his thick golden brown mane framing a face of raw power and ancient intelligence. The lion's amber eyes, flecked with gold in the afternoon light, locked onto the small, trembling child with an intensity that stopped Mateo's heart. The lion took a step forward, then another. His massive paws, each the size of dinner plates, pressed into the dry earth with barely a sound despite his enormous weight. Mateo could see every detail now. The individual hairs in the magnificent mane, the old scars crisscrossing the lion's muzzle, evidence of countless fights and hunts. The powerful muscles rippling beneath the tawny coat, the curved claws, partially extended, capable of tearing through flesh with devastating efficiency. This was it. This was how his short life would end. Mateo thought of his mother, his father, his little sister Sophia back at the camp. Tears streamed down his dirt-stained cheeks, mixing with the dust and sweat. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He simply stood there, a small, vulnerable target, in the middle of the predator's domain. But something was wrong, or rather something was different. The lion's posture wasn't predatory. His ears weren't pinned back in aggression. His tail wasn't lashing with the anticipation of a kill. Instead, the great cat moved with a measured, almost cautious approach. His head tilted slightly to one side as if studying this strange, small human with genuine curiosity rather than hunger. The lion yawned, not in aggression but in what almost seemed like relaxation, and then slowly, deliberately lay down completely. He rested his enormous head on his front paws and continued to watch Mateo with those penetrating amber eyes. It was a posture of rest, not attack, of companionship, not confrontation. When the lion was less than 10 feet away, he stopped completely. Mateo could smell him now, a musky, wild scent mixed with sun-warmed fur and earth. The lion sat down, his haunches settling into the grass with a soft thump, and simply stared at the boy. Then inexplicably, impossibly, the massive predator did something that defied every natural law Mateo thought he understood about the animal kingdom. Mateo's legs finally gave out, and he collapsed to his knees, his small chest heaving with exhausted sobs. He couldn't understand what was happening. Lions didn't do this. They hunted, they killed, they didn't lie down peacefully beside lost children in the middle of the savannah. But here was this magnificent creature, doing exactly that. 6 months earlier, what Mateo didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that this lion had his own story, his own memory that explained this impossible moment. Dr. Elena Morales had been working with the Serengeti Wildlife Conservation Project for 3 years. As one of the leading veterinarians specializing in big cat rehabilitation and treatment, she had seen countless cases of animals injured by poachers, traps, and territorial conflicts. But the case that arrived one sweltering afternoon in April had broken her heart in a way few others had. Elena had worked for 11 straight hours. The surgery was delicate, complicated by infection, and the cub's already weakened state from blood loss and dehydration. She had to make the difficult decision to partially amputate the paw, but she saved the leg. For 3 weeks, the cub remained at the camp, recovering in a specially designed rehabilitation enclosure. Elena personally administered antibiotics twice daily, changed bandages, and monitored every aspect of the cub's recovery. A lioness had appeared at the edge of the research camp, an unprecedented behavior that immediately alarmed the staff. But she wasn't attacking or threatening. She was limping badly, and draped across her back, clinging with weakening strength, was her 3-month-old cub. The little one's right front leg was mangled, caught in a poacher's steel trap that had nearly severed the limb completely. But the most remarkable part wasn't the medical treatment, it was the bond that formed. The mother lioness, a magnificent animal the research team had been tracking for 2 years and had nicknamed Zawadi, meaning gift in Swahili, never left the vicinity of the camp. She slept just beyond the fence line, watching her cub with vigilant eyes, and she watched the human woman who was saving her baby's life. A male lion, clearly Zawadi's mate, also maintained a constant presence. He was enormous, even by lion standards, with a thick dark-edged mane that marked him as a prime male in his physical peak. The research team called him Sultan for his regal bearing and the authoritative way he commanded his territory. He kept his distance, but his amber eyes tracked every movement Elena made around the cub. The cub had turned back to Elena and approached her one final time. It had rubbed against her leg, a gesture of trust and affection that had brought tears to Elena's eyes. Zawadi had watched this interaction carefully, then had done something that Elena would never forget as long as she lived. The lioness had approached her, made direct eye contact for a long, intense moment, and then had released a soft chuffing sound, a vocalization typically reserved for greeting pride members. When the cub was finally strong enough to be released, Elena herself opened the enclosure gate. Zawadi had rushed in immediately, checking her offspring with urgent sniffs and gentle licks. The cub, now capable of walking with only a slight limp, had bounded toward his mother. But before leaving, something extraordinary had occurred. "Mama," he had asked, "do you think the lions will remember you?" Sultan had witnessed all of this from his position, 30 meters away. His amber eyes had locked onto Dr. Elena Morales for a long moment, as if committing her scent, her appearance, her very essence to his memory. Then the little family had disappeared back into the wilderness. Elena had gone home that evening and embraced her own children. Mateo, then 6 years old, and Sofia, just 4. She had held them tightly, thinking about the lioness's maternal devotion and the miracle of the bond that had formed between species. She had told Mateo the whole story, watching his dark eyes widen with wonder and fascination. "I don't know, mi amor," she had replied, stroking his dark hair, "but I'll never forget them." Now, 6 months later, Sultan, the magnificent male lion, stood slowly and moved closer to the crying child. Mateo tensed, certain that his brief reprieve was ending, but the lion simply circled him once, then twice, scenting the air carefully. And then Sultan recognized it. The scent, that specific human smell that was permanently etched in his memory. The smell of the woman who had saved his cub. This small human carried that same scent in his skin, his hair, his very essence. The genetic markers were unmistakable. This was her offspring. Mateo, exhausted and dehydrated, felt the warmth of the lion's body against him. Despite every instinct screaming danger, something in the animal's behavior was so obviously protective that his desperate mind grasped onto it like a lifeline. He leaned against the lion's solid form, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of the great cat's breathing. Within minutes, despite his terror, despite his situation, Mateo's eyes began to close. His body, pushed beyond its limits, demanded rest. He dozed fitfully as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. Each time he startled awake in panic, he found those amber eyes watching him steadily, calmly. The lion didn't sleep. He remained alert, his ears swiveling to track every sound in the darkening savanna. The lion's behavior shifted immediately. He moved to Mateo's side and deliberately positioned his large body between the child and the direction from which a light breeze was carrying the scent of other predators. He lay down again, but this time pressed close enough that his warm flank touched Mateo's small back. The message was clear to any other predator in the area. This small creature was under his protection. As twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, Sultan stood and released a low, commanding call. Mateo woke fully, his heart racing. The lion looked at him directly, then looked toward the distant tree line, then back at Mateo. The message was clear even across the species barrier. It was time to move. Mateo struggled to his feet, his legs cramping from dehydration and exhaustion. Sultan began walking, but slowly, constantly looking back to ensure the child followed. Every 10 or 15 meters, the lion would stop and wait, his patience seemingly infinite. When Mateo stumbled and fell, Sultan walked back to him, lowered his great head, and nudged the boy gently, not roughly, but with a measured push that helped him regain his feet. They traveled like this as darkness fell completely over the savannah. The nocturnal symphony began, the distant whooping of hyenas, the sharp bark of jackals, the haunting calls of nightjars. Each sound made Mateo's heart race with fresh fear, but Sultan's steady presence beside him became his anchor to sanity. An hour into their journey, disaster struck. From the tall grass ahead, a clan of 7 spotted hyenas emerged, their sloped backs and powerful jaws silhouetted against the rising moon. They had caught the scent of an easy meal, a lone, defenseless human child. The clan leader, a large female with notched ears, released the chilling laugh that gave hyenas their eerie reputation. Sultan's reaction was immediate and terrifying. He placed himself directly between Mateo and the advancing clan, his body tensing into a coiled spring of pure lethal power. The roar that erupted from his chest was unlike anything Mateo had ever heard. It was a sound of primal rage, of absolute authority, of a warning that transcended language. The very air seemed to vibrate with its force. Mateo clapped his hands over his ears, feeling the roar in his chest, his bones, his teeth. The hyenas hesitated but didn't retreat. Their numbers emboldened them. Hyenas had been known to drive even male lions from kills when acting as a large enough group. The clan leader darted forward, testing Sultan's defenses. That was her fatal mistake. Sultan moved with a speed that seemed impossible for an animal of his size. He closed the distance in 2 bounds, and struck the lead hyena with a massive paw. The impact sent the hyena spinning through the air. She landed hard, yelping in pain, and scrambled away with a visibly broken foreleg. The message was delivered with brutal clarity. There would be no negotiation. But the remaining hyenas spread out, attempting to flank the lion from multiple directions. Sultan roared again, spinning to face each threat. He lunged at one hyena that came too close, his jaws snapping inches from its hindquarters. He swatted another that tried to circle behind him. His movements were a calculated dance of threat and action, keeping the predators at bay through sheer intimidation and bursts of controlled violence. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes, but felt like hours to Mateo, who had pressed himself against a termite mound, watching his protector battle for both their lives. Sultan received a painful bite to his left hind leg from a hyena that managed to dart in while he was focused on another threat. But the lion's counterattack was swift and brutal. He caught the offending hyena by the scruff of its neck and threw it bodily into 2 others, sending all 3 tumbling. Finally, recognizing that this lion would fight to the death and that casualties would be high, the hyena clan made the tactical decision to retreat. They slunk back into the darkness, their eerie calls fading into the distance. Sultan stood his ground for a full 5 minutes more, his sides heaving, blood dripping slowly from the wound on his leg, ensuring they were truly gone. Only when he was certain of the clan's retreat did Sultan turn back to Mateo. The boy stared up at him with an expression of absolute awe and gratitude. Sultan limped slightly as he returned to the child's side, the wound clearly painful but not debilitating. He lowered his head and very gently nudged Mateo's chest, a gesture that seemed to ask, "Are you all right?" Mateo, acting on pure instinct, reached out with his small hand and very carefully touched the lion's scarred muzzle. Sultan allowed the touch, his eyes closing briefly in what might have been recognition of the gesture's meaning. It was a moment of profound connection, a bridge of understanding between 2 vastly different beings bound by circumstances neither could fully comprehend. As they prepared to continue, a new sound reached them. Distant at first, but growing closer. The distinctive rumble of vehicle engines and even more miraculously, human voices calling out, "Mateo! Mateo!" The search party had expanded their grid, and they were now sweeping this section of the savannah with spotlights and loudspeakers. Around midnight they stopped near a small waterhole. Sultan stood guard as Mateo desperately drank the water, not caring that it was brackish and warm. The lion didn't drink himself, instead maintaining his vigilant watch of their surroundings. In the moonlight, Mateo could see the dried blood on Sultan's leg, and felt a pang of guilt. This magnificent creature had been injured protecting him. They continued their journey through the night. Sultan's pace was slower now, his injured leg forcing him to favor his right side. But he never stopped, never gave up. Mateo walked beside him, his small hand occasionally resting on the lion's flank when he needed stability. The child was far beyond exhaustion, operating on nothing but the will to survive and the trust he had placed in this impossible guardian. Sultan heard it too, his ears pricked forward, and his pace quickened despite his injury. He seemed to understand that these sounds meant safety for the child, meant the completion of his self-appointed mission. They crested a small rise, and below them, less than half a kilometer away, Mateo could see the lights of multiple vehicles spread out in a search pattern. The boy wanted to run, to scream for help, but Sultan released a low warning growl, not aggressive, but cautionary. Running in the dark savannah, even toward safety, was dangerous. The lion set a steady pace down the slope, still leading, still protecting. When they were roughly 200 meters from the nearest vehicle, Sultan stopped. He would go no further. This was the boundary between his world and the human world, and he would not cross it. Mateo understood instinctively. He turned to face his protector, this magnificent animal who had saved his life multiple times over the past hours. Tears streamed down Mateo's face as he threw his small arms as far around the lion's thick neck as they would reach, which wasn't very far. Sultan stood absolutely still, allowing the embrace, his warm breath huffing gently against the child's hair. For a long moment they stood like that, boy and beast, in a farewell that transcended language. Sultan released one final soft chuff, the same greeting sound his mate had given to Mateo's mother 6 months ago. Then the great lion turned and began limping back into the darkness from which they had emerged. Every few steps he looked back at the boy, ensuring Mateo was moving toward safety. Finally, Mateo released his hold and stepped back. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Thank you for saving me." Mateo turned one last time to look for Sultan, but the lion had already disappeared, melting into the shadows as completely as if he had never existed. Only the boy's torn clothes, his scratched arms, and the massive paw prints in the earth bore witness to the night's extraordinary events. The vehicle, a Land Cruiser with Serengeti Wildlife Conservation Project, emblazoned on its side, skidded to a stop. Dr. Elena Morales leaped from the passenger seat before it had fully stopped moving, her face a mask of desperate hope and terror. "Help! I'm here! I'm here!" Mateo began screaming, waving his arms. The nearest vehicle's spotlight swung toward him immediately. The sound of the engine roaring to life and racing toward him filled the air. Elena pulled back slightly, looking at her son's face to see if he was delirious from dehydration. "What? Mateo, what are you talking about?" "Mama," Mateo said weakly, his own tears starting fresh. "Mama, a lion saved me." "Mateo, oh my God, Mateo." She ran to him and swept him into her arms, clutching him so tightly he could barely breathe. She was sobbing, shaking, frantically checking him for injuries. "You're alive. You're alive. Oh, thank God you're alive." The other rangers were already administering first aid, checking his vital signs, giving him water in small measured sips, but Mateo clutched his mother's shirt desperately. "Mama, I'm not making it up. A big male lion found me, and he protected me from hyenas, and he walked with me all night to bring me here." One of the rangers, a weathered Tanzanian man named Joseph, who had worked in the Serengeti for 30 years, knelt beside them. He was examining the ground with a flashlight, his experienced eyes reading the story written in disturbed earthen tracks. His expression grew increasingly astonished.
Dr. Morales.
"Dr. Morales," Joseph said quietly, urgently, "you need to see this."